Hello, I've got another fun video for you today. We're going to be making a quick little project called Little Panda Pocket Pets. So we're going to be working with two colors of wool today, just a white, this is just a carded wool, and some black for our details. So to start off, I'm going to take some of my wool and I'm going to roll it. Basically what we're doing here is we're just trying to somewhat tightly roll a cylinder to start the body of our panda. So you can see how it starts to come together. Don't worry if it's not completely even. If there's more on the edges, we will deal with that in just a little bit. And then I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to start to needle felt it by working my way slowly around the entire piece, trying to keep my needle felting even. So I have 3 different needles here. This one is just a finishing needle. It's a really thin needle. I don't know if I'll use it for this project. This one is a spiral needle. It's a 38 spiral. a 38 star, and this one is a 38 spiral. The spiral needles are by far my favorite needles. They're my go-to. I'd say I use them for 95% on my projects and my needle felting. They felt up fast. They're really nice to use. So if you have any questions about where to find these, I can let you know some of the places that I like to buy mine from. So as I'm working my way around and I'm tightening up my cylinder, I'm also going to work in from the edges and just slowly try to push the little bits of fluff in to create a rounded top, and I'll do the same to create a rounded bottom. We are going to go over this with more wool, so do not worry if it's not completely looking like you want it to in the beginning. We're just trying to create a base to work off of. You can see how this is starting to round up. This side is still open. You can see where I rolled it. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to needle felt this bottom part up. So when you're needle felting, keep in mind that the direction that you're pushing the needle is the direction that you're telling the wool to go. It's almost like you're sculpting the wool. So by coming in at an angle here and going towards the center, you can see I'm starting to close this up and round it out. Now I'm probably going for about a 2-inch little animal for this. It's a small little animal because, as you'll see at the end, I have these little pockets that I like to put them in. I sell these on my Etsy and also in some of the local stores that I'm in, and they're always very popular as gifts, little pocket pets. So you can see it's starting to felt up, starting to be one whole piece. And I'm just going to work on this until it is semi-firm. This is going to be the basis for my little panda. So the key thing is I want to make sure that it is the length that I want at this point. I'm not as worried about the width of it because, as you'll see, I'm going to build that up with more wool. But I do want to make sure that it's not too long. So I'll do that by just working on the edges. If you're not comfortable with needle felting, I suggest that you wear finger guards on your fingers to help protect them. I should be, but I don't. So what I'm doing is just working top to bottom to shorten it. So if you're comfortable, you can do that. But you can also just as easily hold it down on your mat and work from the edges that way. So if you're new to needle felting or you need to be careful of your fingers, this is going to be the way to start off doing it. I like to show a lot of different techniques and ways to do things as I do these videos, but definitely do what works for you. All right, so we are starting to get to the length that I want, and I'm thinking about 1/3 of it is going to be my head area, and 2/3, give or take, is going to be my body. You do not have to decide which side's the head and body right now. As you work, it'll probably show itself as you start to wrap on the extra wool. But sometimes, like in this one, I already have a little divot here, so I'm like, okay, well, that side will be my head. If you like to work with a multi-tool, one with 2 or 3 needles in it, this is a great little project to play with that on. Some people feel it felts up faster to use the multi-needles. You're using 2 or 3 in one. Honestly, I prefer the single needle. I don't know if it's just that the needle goes in further, but I find that it just knits up quicker for me, even with just one needle, than using a multi-tool. So don't worry if you're a beginner needle felter and you start to have some square shapes to this. Don't stress about that. We will go over it, but a lot of the reason that you might not get a smooth rounded surface like this is because you're not rotating it enough and you're needle felting in one area more than the others. So I really try, it's almost like a rotisserie chicken or a hot dog, and I just try to roll it around as I go. So then I'm always coming at it from a different angle. I don't like to do one side, flip and do the other side, flip, because that's when you're going to start to get that squared form. It works better if you're just kind of going all around it from different directions. And then just always remember that the direction you're pushing your needle is the direction you're telling the wool to go. So I'm telling it to go from the outside into the inside to knit it up and also to shorten my shape. So now I've got my cord. It's not very hard. You can see it's squishy. It's definitely felted up. You can tell that, but it's still squishy, which is just fine because as we go, it's going to felt up even more. If you felt this too much and it's too hard in the beginning, then it actually becomes a little bit harder to add your different layers on. And for this one, we want to keep a little bit of give to the finished product. When I do my birds and my real big sculptures, I felt everything up a lot harder, a lot neater. I want it to be a really firm surface so there's no give to it. But for this, we're just having fun with it. Leave a little bit more play. We'll leave a little bit more give. And you'll see as we add on our next layer of wool, this is going to felt up a lot more. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my white wool, and I like to wrap it in 2 parts. So one part will be the head and one part will be the body. So we'll start up here. I think this side is going to be my head. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tightly wrap it around. Wrapping tightly is going to shorten your needle felting process because it's holding that inner core a little tighter. And it's already firm as you start to needle felt it, so the fibers, they just knit together closer because you're already holding them tight. So you can see even just doing that little bit, it's tightening up because I wrapped it tightly. If you can't get a tight wrap, do not stress about it. You just needle felt it the same way. The only difference is it might take a little bit longer for it to needle felt up. The tighter you roll something, the faster it needle felts, because as you're getting those fibers to interlock, you're really getting the fibers on the outside to interlock to the fibers on the inside. So it just helps speed the process. All right, now I'm going to do another one down here. And I like to do this in layers. Sometimes I'll do a couple layers. It just depends how much I get on at each pass, but I don't like to do huge thick layers at once. I find it just felts up better if I do layer by layer. Although this one on the bottom, it was a little bit more wool, so this might be the only layer that I need for the body of my panda. I'm trying to keep this visible on the video, so sometimes it might look like that I'm needle felting from an odd angle. Don't feel like you have to do the same angle as me. Just want to make sure you see it. But one thing that I do like to do at this point is I've wrapped my body, and so I'm kind of creating a slight difference between the head, which I'm going to wrap again, and the body. So at this point, I like to kind of come from the middle. And remember, I'm pushing my wool, so I'm just kind of pushing my wool down to round from that side and from the bottom side, which is just going to create this slight definition here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the last bit on my head as well, right here. Wrap it around. All right, and then we're going to needle felt this all together and see if we like what it's looking like. If I'm getting ahead of you, pause the video, catch up, and then start it again. I do try to do these a little bit quickly so that people aren't getting ahead of me, and you can just follow along. So one thing I like to do is I will actually push down on my needle felting as I needle felt it, and same as wrapping it tight, it's just pushing those fibers together, and it can just knit them up a little bit faster because you're getting fibers all the way from one side and pushing them all the way down towards the other. So at this point, all I'm going for is not really a complete snowman shape, but just a little bit of it. I'll leave a little bit of an indent here, but mostly it's going to be this shape that I'm going for. I'm just going to needle felt it up a little bit more and tighten up all my layers. A couple more minutes of needle felting on this one. Again, just make sure that you're coming at it from all different angles, moving it around as you're needle felting it. The more that you move it around, the more angles that you go from, the smoother your surface is going to be. And again, make sure you're coming in from the bottom and the top, just to round those edges. All right, so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm still probably going to needle felt the whole thing a little bit more, but I'm going to create the nose area for my little panda bear, so I'm going to add this on. What I like to do is I like to roll together a little bit of the white, and I will needle felt this up a little bit. And I'm just needle felting this up a little bit to create a bit of that shape, so that when I add it to here, it doesn't completely disappear into the existing shape. So I've got a little bit of a round ball, and I'm going to pick my side that I want my face to be on. And I'm just gonna attach this right here. Again, I did not needle felt that up a lot, just enough to kind of retain the shape as I add it on here. So you can see it's creating that little bump. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a little bit more of this, and I'm just going right over the top. And the reason why I'm doing this is to smooth in those lines where it was attached and make it look like I created it all in one go. So you can see it smoothing it out a little bit. You can't see where it was connected. And then at this point, I'm just going to continue to try to shape what my nose is going to look like. Just going up a little bit. I'm thinking that the nose is going to go right here. So this is going to be the highest point, and then it's going to almost taper down towards the neck. And if this is not a big enough piece at this point, you can always just get a little bit more wool and you can go right over it again and again and again until you have it built up how you want it. At this point, I also kind of get a little idea of where my eyes are going to go, and I create a very, very minor depression there. Nothing at all like what I did if you watch my previous one of the owl. We're not doing anything that's that deep. We're not really trying to carve out those eyes, but I'm just trying to get an idea for where my black's going to go. Make sure I like the shape, make sure everything's looking good. And again, this is just a little tiny pocket pet. You'll see at the end what I mean when I talk about that. So this is just a little guy. He doesn't need to be very big. All right, you can see I've got my nose right here and right here going to be my eyes. And this is going to turn into my body. And I'm just going to make sure that it's needle felted up as tightly as I want it to be. It seems like it's takes a really long time for things to needle felt up at first, and then all of a sudden you hit this point where it just comes together. You've tightened up all your fibers enough that they just all start to lock. And we're about to get to that point. So now that I know where my front is, I'll keep the back side a little flatter so that this is flat and not so much the transition in between. All right, now let's look at some details. We've got a nice shape going here, a little bit of give, but that's going to come out as I add my black on, and it'll start to look like a panda. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add my eyes, and I do that with just a little black. And I'm going to do it just at an angle. Now you don't need to use much black for this. You can always add more to it, so it's better to use a smaller piece than a bigger piece. So I usually just try out my one side, and then I'm going to do the same for the other. And I'm going to make sure I like my placement before I finish needle felting it. At this point, if I needed to, I could pull the black out and start over if I didn't like where it was ending up. Another thing I tend to do is I tend to look at it upside down. Sometimes it's easier to see symmetry from upside down because you're not looking so much at features. Just depends what works for you. So these are going to be my eyes, and I'm pretty happy with the placement. So now I'm just going to needle felt it until it creates just a little bit of a more heavier needle felted area. So I get a nice edge to it, and you can tell what is supposed to be the eyes. If you find that one side doesn't quite match the other, you can always take a little bit more of your black and add it wherever you need to. We're going to add a little black for the nose too. Again, I'll just roll a little bit between my fingers. Need a little bit more than that though. Go a little bigger on that nose. You can take some scissors and just snip away any of those extra little pieces as you go if you need to. Now that I have my nose and my eyes in place, I will just work at finishing up the shape on this. So I'm just going to work on any details that I might want to finesse. I'm just making this whole nose shape a little bit smaller. And I will just keep adding layers of black until the nose is the size and the shape that I'm happy with. I got a little piece of black that I needle felted right through from the nose, so I'm just going to go over this area with a little bit more white to hide that. All right, we're going to do some little arms and legs and ears. So to do that, I'm just going to needle felt up some little tiny cylinders. That one jumped away from me. Now I'm just needle felting these first because I don't want them to be flat as I put them on my Panda. I want them to stay a little bit raised. So by needle felting the shape first, it will keep a bit of that shape as I needle felt it onto the Panda. All right, so we're going to do 4 of these. Try to keep them about the same size. As long as I can get 2 and 2, that's fine too. The paws or the feet can always be a little bigger. Again, be careful of your fingers here. If you're not sure, use your finger guards. You can see I'm going pretty slow. I'm really making sure I know where I'm going to be pointing and pushing my needle before I go. You definitely do not want to be working fast when you're working on these little pieces. And I'm just always making sure I'm pointing my needle underneath where my fingers are. I know it's hard to tell from this picture, but from the camera, but I'm really making sure that I'm nowhere near my fingers as I'm doing this. A good thing to do if you're new to this or if you're not sure, you can always hold your piece with some scissors, or a lot of times I'll take an old needle that may have broken and you can use that to hold your piece, and that will keep your fingers out of the way if you're worried about getting your fingers. Just a couple tricks. All right, so I've got 2 bigger ones and 2 smaller ones. The thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the smaller ones at the top. Actually, I think I need those just a little bigger anyways. It's a little smaller than I want the arm to be. So I'll just wrap it again. And just needle felt around that original shape. And just roll as I go. Roll and needle felt. Again, I'm making sure I am nowhere near my finger. I'm actually using my nail to just kind of push it ahead of me. So if I do hit anything, I would hit the top of my nail. All right, so let's do these 2 and let's do these 2. Do a little arm. And now I'm just going to attach this piece on. I'm going to go at it from all angles. I'm going to do the same to the other side, and what I like to do is I like to put all 4 of them on my little Panda before I really make sure they're secure, because if you only needle felt it a couple times, it's easy. Like I see that this one should be moved just a tiny bit, so I can just pull that out and reposition it. So I like to just lightly needle felt them on to start and make sure of my position. We're going to do a couple little paws. Same thing. Just going to attach it like that. And like that. All right, it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to just go over these. Now I like to come in at an angle on the edge. That's just going to tuck all these edge fibers into my little paws. And smooth it out. Same on this side. I'm just trying to attach it along all the edges, especially so that I get a smooth connection point. All right, we're going to make some ears next. Very similar, except we're just going to do them flat. So I like to start with a slightly larger piece of wool. It's not very thick, but I make a circle that's larger than what I want my ear to be. I'll needle felt it just a little bit and flip it. You don't want to go very deep with this because you're not trying to needle felt it into the mat. You're just using the mat as your base. If you have a brush for this, this is also a good time to pull this out. Just because you're needle felting on this, you're not needle felting it into the mat. You're not getting all the same fibers, but it just depends on what you have to work with. So once I start to get a little bit of a shape going on, I'll just kind of roll my edges in just a tiny bit. So you can see I'm starting to get a round shape here. And this is where I'll just start to move it back and forth and needle felt the shape. So what you also want to do is you also want to try to make sure you needle felt in the edges. So you can put your finger or another piece right on the surface and just hold it as you're mixing it in. Or I would suggest doing this with gloves, not with your bare fingers, but you can hold it and then just very slowly and very gently you go along the edges and just tuck all those edges in. So this would be a great time to pull out those gloves, but whatever you do, just make sure you're going really slowly and really gently whenever you work this close to your fingers. If you're going very slowly and very gently, you're less likely to slip and get yourself. So you can see that this is starting to look like a round ear. So I'm going to start on the other one as well. It's a little faster with this one, so you can see I'm just kind of rolling in my edges. Sometimes I find that one edge, you can see it's just not quite enough wool up there. So you can add more wool to it as needed. And then the key here is you just want to try to end up with two ears that are about the same size. Again, just a little bit more on this side and then we'll be able to play around with the shape. If doing something like this is too small for you, you can always cut out two circular shapes from a felt sheet, some black felt. I usually like to use a penny or a dime for tracing, depending on the size of my finished ear. This is also a good time to pull out your thinner needle. And you can use it to tighten up the edges as well, as you're working with such a thin area. Just depends what works best for you. So when I get to this point and I have it nicely needle felted, I will usually take my scissors and just trim some of those excess little pieces and just smooth my edges. You want to make sure you're not cutting what you felted, but just going along the very edge and just getting those stray little pieces of wool to smooth it out. So now I'm going to add my little ears. I'm going to hold them where I want them. In this case, like this, with a little bit of a cup. And I'm going to needle felt them on. And you want to make sure that they're well connected. On here. So this one's going to go right there. I always try to attach from the back first because I'm going to go over that with a little white. So if I end up with a little bit of extra black where I made my connection, it'll be hidden. I'll show you that in just a second. Look at that little panda bear coming together. He's starting to look like a panda. Do just a little additional shaping. So now back here, what I like to do sometimes is just take a little bit more of my white and I'll go over the edge to hide any extra black where it's connecting. And also I'm just making sure it is really needle felted in because now I am felting the black and the white fibers together, so it's all really integrated. Panda. All right, so when I get to this point of my panda, I'm just going to go over it and make sure everything is nice and smooth. Double check that I like how it's looking. Sometimes I just slightly circle around the fibers, and that way I can easily needle felt them in. All right, I'm going to go over these edges again. one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my last little bit of black. I'm going to make a little tiny tail. And just making sure I'm rolling it, keeping my fingers well out of the way. And he's gonna get his little tail. All right, and one last smoothing of everything. Making sure everything is secure. You don't want any of his feet to fall off. You can come in with your scissors here too and just kind of lightly get some of those little stray edges. Smaller scissors are actually really great for this as well. If you have a small pair of sewing scissors so that you can get into some of those areas. Whatever ends up working. And then the last thing I do to it is just little bits of white to kind of highlight where the eyes would be and where the reflection might be coming off of them. Break up all that black in the eye area. And again, you can just trim off any stray pieces. Make sure you're not cutting your project or your ears. But you can kind of go over the edges and just get any of that fluff that still remains. You can also take one of your sharper, your finer gauge, your thinner needles, and use that over the whole thing, and that's going to help smooth it out as well. I probably have about another 2 minutes of going over this to make sure it's really smooth, and I've got all my edges tucked in. But just for sake of time, I'm going to stop it here. I'm not going to do those last little touch-ups, but you can see you've got your little panda, and now you've got your little pocket, and when you add them together, you've got a pocket panda. So all I do for this is I just sew my felt together and I create a pocket panda. These have been very popular. People really like them. So let me know if you do this. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions.